Emma Carter stood in the restaurant bathroom, gripping the sink so hard her knuckles turned white, and seriously considered climbing out the window. Not metaphorically. Literally. The window was right there, because the man at table 7 was too good, too kind, too real, and Emma Carter had learned, the hard way, that men like that always left. So she made a decision, one that would have changed everything, and not for the better. What happened next in that bathroom is the kind of moment that either breaks a person completely or finally sets them free. Drop the city you're watching from in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it moves you, subscribe. We're just getting started. She had gotten very good at it. Disappearing. Not the dramatic kind, not running away, not changing her name, not leaving town in the middle of the night. Emma Carter's disappearing was quieter than that. More practiced, more deliberate. The kind of vanishing act that happens so slowly the person doing it barely notices until one day they look in the mirror and genuinely struggle to recognize the face looking back. She was 32 years old. She owned a bakery that people drove 40 minutes out of their way to visit. She had a laugh that her best friend, Diane, always said could fill a room. She remembered birthdays. She showed up when people were sick. She sent cards. Real cards, handwritten ones with actual stamps, for occasions most people forgot existed. Emma Carter was, by every measure that mattered, someone worth knowing. She just didn't believe that. Not even a little. It was a Tuesday morning in October when the call came. The kind of Tuesday that feels identical to every other Tuesday: cold coffee, flour on her apron by 6 a.m., the familiar rhythm of the industrial oven cycling on. The smell of cinnamon and brown sugar filling the back of the shop before the sun had fully committed to rising. Emma was elbow deep in sourdough when her cell phone buzzed against the metal prep table. She ignored it. It buzzed again and again. On the fourth buzz, she grabbed it with one doughy hand and read the name on the screen. Diane, she answered. It's too early for whatever this is, Emma said. It's 7:45. I've been up since 4. It's midnight to me. Emma. Diane's voice shifted. That particular shift, the one that meant Diane had made a decision and Emma was not going to like it. I need you to say yes to something before I explain what it is. Emma set down the dough. That is the single most alarming sentence you have ever said to me. And you once called me from a police station in Albuquerque. That was a misunderstanding. You were on a horse, Diane, in a Walgreens. The horse was very calm. Emma. Focus. A pause. There's a charity dinner. Saturday night. The Hartwell Community Foundation thing, you know? The one that raises money for the fire department and the children's hospital. I know what it is. I need you to come. I'm busy Saturday. You're not. I might be. Emma. I called you last Saturday at 9 p.m., and you were in bed watching a documentary about lighthouses. Lighthouses are fascinating, Diane. You need to come to this dinner. Emma leaned against the prep table and stared at the ceiling. There was a water stain up there she'd been meaning to have looked at for 3 months. It had started to look vaguely like Abraham Lincoln. She found this comforting in ways she couldn't fully explain. Why? Emma asked. A very long pause. Diane. There's someone I want you to meet. And there it was. Emma closed her eyes. No. Emma, no. Absolutely not. We've talked about this. I don't do setups. I don't do blind dates. I don't do. His name is Noah. He's a firefighter. He's 38. He lost his wife a few years ago, and he has a little girl named Lily who is, from all accounts, the funniest 8-year-old in the state of Colorado. He's my neighbor's brother, and he is. I don't care what he is. Emma. Diane. I love you. I genuinely deeply love you, and I am telling you, as your best friend of 17 years, that I am not going to that dinner. Find someone else. She hung up. She went back to her dough. She told herself she felt fine about it. The problem with being good at disappearing is that it requires constant maintenance. Emma had developed a whole system, a careful, invisible architecture of avoidance that she'd been building and reinforcing. For so long it had started to feel like just the way things were not a choice she was making, but simply reality. She didn't avoid photos because she was insecure. She just didn't see the point. She didn't turn down invitations because she was afraid. She was just tired. or busy, or the timing was never quite right. She wore dark colors and loose silhouettes not because she was hiding, but because they were comfortable, practical, easy. She told herself these things with such consistency that she had almost stopped hearing the hollow sound they made. Almost. The truth, the one Emma kept locked in a room she rarely visited, was simpler and more brutal than any story she told herself. It had a face. Several of them, actually. A rotation of faces that showed up in her memory at inconvenient moments. When she was tired or quiet or standing in front of a mirror. Faces that came attached to specific words she could still hear with perfect clarity years later. There was Tyler, sophomore year of college, who told her in the parking lot of a Taco Bell at 11 p.m. that she was the most fun person he'd ever spent time with, but that he needed to be with someone who took care of herself. As though Emma's body was evidence of negligence, as though she had simply forgotten to be smaller. There was her Aunt Patricia, Christmas dinner, who patted Emma's hand across the table and said, with genuine warmth, "You know, sweetheart, you have such a beautiful face. You could be stunning if you just applied yourself." Emma had excused herself to the bathroom and sat on the closed lid of the toilet for 11 minutes, breathing slowly, reminding herself that Patricia was old and meant well and that none of it was true. But the body keeps score, and Emma's body had kept all of it. Every comment stored and catalogued, every sideways glance remembered, every moment she'd walked into a room and watched someone's eyes move over her and register something disappointment, maybe, or reassessment filed away in that locked room like evidence, in a case that never seemed to close. The verdict it kept returning, "You are too much and not enough," simultaneously, in ways that cannot be reconciled. So Emma baked. She baked extraordinary things. Really, the kind of bread that made people stop mid-bite and look up with expressions usually reserved for religious experiences. She built a small business that genuinely mattered to people in this town. She was kind and funny, and the kind of friend who showed up. She had made, by any reasonable standard, a good life, but loved the particular, vulnerable, terrifying kind that she had quietly stopped believing was available to her. It wasn't a dramatic conclusion, more like a slow leak, a gradual, quiet exhaling of hope that she had told herself was actually maturity. Wisdom, peace with oneself. She was fine. She kept telling herself she was fine. Diane showed up at the bakery at 3:30 on Thursday afternoon. Emma saw her coming through the front window and felt a very specific kind of dread. Diane was carrying coffee. 2 cups, from the good place 2 blocks over. This was a negotiating tactic Emma recognized immediately. "Don't," Emma said. Before Diane had even opened the door, Diane pushed through anyway, set both cups on the counter, and looked at Emma with the particular expression of someone who has decided, firmly, that love sometimes looks like refusing to take no for an answer. 10 minutes, Diane said. "Just listen to me for 10 minutes, Diane." "He called me last night." Diane slid one of the coffees across the counter. "Noah," he called, because his sister apparently also tried to rope him into this thing, and he also said no. And then she called me to complain, and Noah and I ended up talking for 40 minutes. And Emma. She stopped, put her hand flat on the counter. "He's not what you're picturing. You don't know what I'm picturing. You're picturing someone who will look at you across a dinner table and decide, quietly, that you're not what he was hoping for, and then be polite about it in a way that is somehow worse than if he'd just been rude." Emma said nothing, because that was exactly what she was picturing. "He's not that," Diane said, softer now. "He's been through things, Emma. Real things. He's not looking for perfect. He's not even looking. Really, his sister dragged him into this the same way I'm dragging you. He's just a tired, good man who showed up because someone he loves asked him to. That doesn't mean he'd want. I'm not saying he'll fall in love with you at dinner." Diane picked up her coffee. "I'm saying you could both just be 2 people at a table, eating food, being humans. That's all I'm asking." Emma stared at the counter. "What if he's unkind?" And her voice, to her own horror, was very small when she said it. Diane reached across and put her hand over Emma's. "Then we leave," Diane said. "And I drive you home and we watch something terrible on television and eat your leftover croissants and mock him mercilessly. I promise." A long silence. Emma picked up the coffee. "If I go," she said, "and this is awful, I will owe you. Completely and forever. You already owe me from Albuquerque. Consider it cumulative." Emma drank her coffee. "Saturday," she said. "One dinner. That is all I'm agreeing to." She almost didn't wear the blue dress. She had 4 different outfits laid out on her bed by 6:30 Saturday evening, and she stood in front of them with wet hair and a feeling in her chest that she refused to categorize as hope, because hope was the thing that set you up for the fall, and she had learned not to do that to herself. The first option was safe. Dark, loose, completely unremarkable. It was the outfit equivalent of saying, "Don't notice me," in a language everyone could understand. The second was slightly better, but had a button she'd been meaning to fix for 3 weeks. The third she put on, looked at herself in the mirror for 30 seconds, and took off again without fully understanding why. The fourth was the blue one. She'd bought it 6 months ago on a whim, on a Tuesday when she'd happened to walk past a boutique, and the dress had been in the window, and something about it, the color, maybe, or the way it draped, had made her stop. She'd bought it without trying it on. She'd brought it home, hung it in the back of her closet, and told herself she'd wear it someday. She put it on. She stood in front of the mirror. She looked at herself, really looked, without the usual quick glance and redirect, and she saw a woman she didn't entirely recognize. Not because she looked different, but because the dress didn't apologize. It didn't minimize or conceal or suggest that the body wearing it was something that needed to be managed. It was just a dress, and she was just a woman wearing it. And for one strange, suspended moment, Emma thought, "Okay, this is fine, this is okay." Then the thought passed and the usual static came back in, and she almost took it off. She didn't. She drove to the restaurant with her hands tight on the wheel, and the radio turned up loud enough that she couldn't hear her own thoughts. And she sat in the parking lot for 4 minutes before she made herself get out of the car. "One dinner," she told herself, "one meal. You eat food, you are polite. You go home." She walked through the door. She saw him before he saw her. He was standing near the back of the room, talking to an older man, a glass of water in his hand. And Emma's first thought, which she would never say out loud to anyone, ever was that he looked exactly like the kind of person she'd spent years believing wasn't meant for her. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the quiet, settled bearing of someone who had been through hard things and come out the other side not unscathed but intact. Dark hair with just enough gray at the temples to make him look like someone who had earned his face rather than simply inherited it. He laughed at something, the older man said, a real laugh. Not a polite one, and something about that laugh made Emma feel simultaneously more and less nervous than she had been 30 seconds ago. Diane materialized at her elbow. "You wore the blue dress. Don't make it a thing. I'm just saying, Diane. I swear to God." And then Noah Bennett looked up. Their eyes met across the room, and Emma watched him do exactly what she had been waiting her whole life for people to stop doing. She watched his eyes take her in. All of her. And she braced herself. He smiled. Not the careful, compensating smile of someone recalibrating their expectations. Not the performative warmth of someone deciding to be gracious. Just a smile. As though he was simply glad she was there. Emma felt something loosen in her chest. Something she hadn't known was tight. Diane nudged her forward. His name sounded different when he said it himself. "Noah," he said, extending his hand. "And please, my sister has been building this up for 3 weeks. So whatever version of me she described, go ahead and lower your expectations significantly." Emma shook his hand. "She described you as a tired, good man who showed up because someone he loves asked him to." Something shifted in his face. "That's actually pretty accurate." "I know." Emma released his hand. "I'm Emma. Emma." He said it like he was trying it out. "My sister did not describe you." "Your sister was smart, she usually is." He gestured toward the table. "Should we?" "Yes. Absolutely. Let's eat food and be polite and see how this goes." He laughed. That same real laugh. "Perfect. That's exactly my plan too." They sat down. The dinner was supposed to be 2 hours. They stayed for 4. It happened gradually. The way these things do when they're real, not a sudden shift, but a slow unwinding. Like rope that's been pulled tight for a long time, finally going slack. Emma had come into this dinner with every wall she owned at full height. She'd been prepared to be pleasant and distant, and leave on time, with her dignity intact. She hadn't been prepared for Noah Bennett to be genuinely, disarmingly interesting. He talked about his daughter the way some people talk about sunrises, with a kind of reverent, helpless wonder, like Lily was something he still couldn't quite believe existed. He pulled out his phone at one point and showed Emma a drawing Lily had made that week, a crayon portrait of what appeared to be a large purple dog, labeled Dad's best friend in shaky capital letters. "She's a strong speller," Emma said. "Exceptional." He put the phone away. "She told me it's a wolf, actually, and that I should know the difference." "How old is she?" "8, going on 45. Emma smiled. "Where is she tonight?" "My sister, who, I should mention, is deeply invested in how this evening goes. I expect a detailed debrief before 10 a.m. tomorrow. Diane has already texted me twice, and we've been sitting here 20 minutes. He raised his water glass. "To our sisters." Emma raised hers. "Who are impossible, but usually right," he said. "Unfortunately." She looked at him, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she didn't feel the urge to minimize herself. Didn't feel the pull to make herself smaller, quieter, less the automatic dimming she did in the presence of people she wanted to impress. She just felt present. It scared her. "Tell me something true," he said, somewhere after the main course, while they were both ignoring dessert menus in the way that meant they would both order dessert. Emma looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he considered, "we've been talking for 2 hours and I feel like I know you, which is strange, because I also feel like there's a lot you're not saying. So tell me something true. Something you wouldn't normally say." Emma was quiet for a moment. She thought about deflecting. She was excellent at deflecting. "Instead," she said, "I almost didn't walk through the door tonight." He nodded, like he'd suspected. "I sat in the parking lot for 4 minutes trying to convince myself to leave." "What made you stay?" she considered. "I told myself it was just dinner, just food, that I could manage 2 hours of being polite and then go home. And now you've been here 4 hours. I've noticed that." "Yes." He leaned back slightly. "I sat in my car for 6 minutes," he said. "My sister called me while I was in there and told me the parking lot did not count as showing up." Emma laughed. "A real one, not a polished one." "Can I tell you something?" he said. "Yes." He looked at his water glass. "I haven't done any of this in a long time, and I told myself it was because I was protecting Lily, which is true. But it's also," he stopped, "it's also that it's easier not to. It's easier to just close the particular door and say you've made peace with it." Emma said nothing. "Have you made peace with it?" he asked. Not accusatory, just asking. She looked at him for a long moment. "I convinced myself I had," she said. He nodded slowly. "I think," he said, "that there's a difference between making peace with something and just getting very quiet about it." Something about those words landed somewhere deep in Emma's chest. Like a key turning in a lock she hadn't known was there. She opened her mouth to respond and stopped herself, because something else was opening too. Something old and frightened and very familiar. Something that lived in the locked room she didn't visit. Something that recognized this feeling, this exact feeling of warmth and safety and being genuinely seen and knew from long experience what it meant. It meant she was at risk. It meant she should go. She looked at the man across the table, his open face, his careful honesty, his gray-templed patience, and she thought, he seems real. He seems kind. But they always do at first. And then the but comes. The but always comes, and she thought, I should save him the trouble. I should save us both the trouble. And before the fear could talk her out of it, before she could think too hard about what she was doing, she leaned in. "I should probably save us both sometime," she said. His expression changed, alert now, careful. She kept her voice low, almost a whisper. The words were ones she had thought 100 times, but never said out loud. "Not to anyone, not like this. No man would choose me," she said. "Not after really knowing me. I've seen it enough times to know that's just how it goes." So she straightened slightly, managed something close to a smile. There it is. She expected him to be polite about it. She expected the graceful, kindish redirect of a decent man looking for an exit. She'd seen it before. She knew exactly how it went. Noah Bennett sat very still. He looked at her. Not with pity, not with carefully managed sympathy. He looked at her the way someone looks at a person who has just said something that breaks their heart a little. And not because the person is wrong, but because of how long they've believed it. He said, "I'm choosing you." Emma's breath stopped. Not figuratively. Her lungs literally paused mid-cycle. Some automatic function, briefly suspended by the complete unexpectedness of what she'd just heard. "I'm choosing you," he said again, quieter the second time, like he wanted to make sure she'd heard it correctly. "Not some future version of you. Not a smaller version, or a different version, or a version that meets some standard you think you're failing. This one. Right here." She stared at him. "You don't." She stopped. Tried again. "You don't know me well enough to say that." "Maybe not," he said. "But I know enough to know that whatever you think disqualifies you, it doesn't. And whoever taught you to whisper something like that about yourself." He paused. His voice dropped slightly. "They were wrong." Emma looked down at the table. Her hands were in her lap and they were shaking, just slightly, and she was grateful the tablecloth hid them. "It's not about one person," she said. It's been a long time. A lot of people. A lot of different ways of being told the same thing, I know. You can't know. Not the details." His voice was steady, patient. "But I know what it looks like when someone has been carrying something heavy for a very long time. And I know what it looks like when they've gotten so used to the weight that they've started to believe it's just who they are." She looked up. He was watching her with those steady, dark eyes, and there was nothing in his expression that looked like performance. No agenda she could detect, no calculation beneath the surface. Just a man being honest at a dinner table on a Saturday night, in the particular way of someone who has also been through and tough to be done with pretense. "Why?" she asked. And she hated how small the word was. How much it gave away. He thought about it. Really thought, not just reaching for the easy answer. "Because," he said, "you have spent this entire dinner being one of the most real people I have sat across a table from in years. And real is." He stopped. Looked for the word. "Real is rare. And I'm not going to pretend I don't notice it, just because you've decided to warn me off." Emma said nothing. "I'm not asking you to believe it tonight," he said. "I'm just asking you to not walk away from whatever this is before it has a chance to be something." The restaurant had gotten quieter around them. Other tables emptying, the evening winding down, the world doing its normal thing outside, while something not normal was happening at a small table near the back. Emma looked at the man across from her. She thought, "This is the part where I say something careful and pull back and drive home alone, and feel the specific kind of safety that is also a kind of dying," she thought. "I know exactly how to do that. I've done it so many times I could do it in my sleep," she thought. But he said it like he meant it. He said it the way people say things they've decided, not things they're performing. And she thought for just a moment, before the fear could close that door again, what if? She exhaled. "Okay," she said. "Okay, I'm not." She shook her head slightly. "I'm not saying I believe it. I'm saying She looked for the word. "I'll stay. For now, I'll stay." Something in his face settled into something quiet and certain, the way a person's face settles when they've been hoping for something and have just been told. The hoping wasn't for nothing. "That's enough," he said. "It might not be. Later, it's enough for now." She looked at him. He looked at her. Outside, the October night was cold and clear, the kind of Colorado cold that feels clean rather than punishing. And somewhere across town, a little girl named Lily was asleep at her aunt's house, entirely unaware that on this particular Saturday, at a small table in the back of a restaurant, two people with carefully built walls and carefully hidden scars were making the terrifying, uncertain ordinary decision to stay. Not forever. Not with any guarantees, just to stay. And in Emma's locked room, in the dark and the careful quiet, where she kept all the evidence against herself, something shifted. Not much, not yet. But something. She went home at 11:17. She changed out of the blue dress and hung it carefully. Not in the back of the closet this time, but on the hook behind her bedroom door, where she could see it. She lay in the dark and she looked at the ceiling and she thought about a man who had looked at her, all of her, and said, "I'm choosing you," like it was a decision he'd made and didn't need to unmake. She thought about how much she wanted to believe it. She thought about how terrified she was of how much she wanted to believe it. She didn't sleep for a long time. But for the first time in years, the thing keeping her awake wasn't the locked room and its careful inventory of evidence. It was something else entirely. Something that, if she'd let herself name it, she might have called quietly, carefully, half afraid of the word hope. To be continued in part 2, where Noah's daughter asks Emma a question no adult would dare to, and the truth about Noah's own hidden wounds begins to surface. 3 days passed after that Saturday dinner, and Emma heard nothing. She told herself this was fine. She told herself she had not expected anything different. She made bread. She opened the bakery at 5:30 Monday morning the same way she always did, measured flour the same way she always did, and she did not check her phone more than was reasonable, which she defined generously as not more than once every 15 minutes, which was, by any objective standard, completely reasonable. On the 4th day, her phone rang while she was icing a tray of cinnamon rolls. She picked up before the second ring, then immediately hated herself for it. "I was going to text," Noah said, "but I kept rewriting it, and it kept sounding wrong, so I called instead." Which might also sound wrong. I'm aware of that possibility. Emma set down the icing spatula. "It doesn't sound wrong." Good pause. Hi. Another pause. Shorter this time. "I told Lily I met someone at the dinner Saturday. She asked me 4 questions. In order. Yes. First question, is she nice? Second question, does she have a dog? Third question, can she do a cartwheel? Fourth question, a slight hesitation. Does she make you laugh?" Emma felt something warm move through her chest, unexpected and quiet, like the first heat from an oven when you open the door. "What did you tell her?" "I told her, yes. No, unknown, and yes." He paused. "The cartwheel one is still open. I want you to know I did not commit to anything on your behalf." Emma laughed. "A real one. The kind that surprised her. She wants to meet you," Noah said, and his voice shifted slightly. When he said it, something more careful behind the words. Something she could hear him weighing. "I know it's fast. I know we've had one dinner, and this is probably moving in a direction that requires more than one dinner before I just wanted to tell you. Because she asked me, and I don't lie to her. Not even about small things." Emma stood very still at her prep table. This was the part. She recognized it, the way you recognize a road you've been down before, the specific texture of the pavement, the way the light falls at this particular curve. This was the part where things became real, where they stopped being theoretical. She thought about saying something careful, something that would slow this down, put appropriate distance between herself and whatever was building on the other side of this phone call. "Tell her the cartwheel situation is being evaluated," Emma said instead. "And I'll get back to her." Noah laughed, and she heard relief in it, underneath the warmth. "Saturday morning," he said. "There's a farmer's market. She likes the apple cider donuts. I make better apple cider donuts than any farmer's market. Now I'm afraid you've made a promise to an 8-year-old you'll have to keep." "I'm a professional," Emma said. "I'll manage." After she hung up, she stood in the middle of her bakery for a moment. Flour on her apron, icing on her fingers, the smell of cinnamon in the air. She told herself she wasn't smiling. She was absolutely smiling. Diane called 11 minutes later. Emma did not answer. Diane texted, "I know you just talked to him. I can feel it." Emma put the phone face down and went back to her cinnamon rolls and did not feel the specific giddiness of someone standing at the top of a very high place, or at least, she told herself she didn't. She felt it anyway. Saturday came the way Saturdays do when you are both dreading and wanting something too slowly all week. Then suddenly, all at once, too fast. Emma was up at 4 a.m. Not for the bakery. The bakery was closed Saturdays. She was up because she had been awake since 3:15 making mental arguments with herself about what to wear, what to bring, whether bringing donuts was too much, whether it was weird that she'd been practicing cartwheel form in her living room on Thursday evening, which she had been briefly, just to know whether the answer was technically yes or no, and she had concluded that the answer was no, but that she was also 32 years old, and this was not information she planned to share with anyone. She made a half-dozen apple cider donuts. She put them in a box. She spent 20 minutes deciding how casual to make herself look, which is a process that takes significantly longer than simply trying to look nice. Because the goal is to look like you didn't try, which requires trying considerably more. She drove to the address. Noah had texted her with both hands tight on the wheel. The radio off this time, the quiet in the car feeling somehow appropriate. He was outside when she pulled up, standing on the front porch, coffee in hand, wearing a flannel shirt and jeans, and he looked exactly the way someone looks when they've also been awake, thinking about this morning, which is to say, he looked slightly more alert than the hour, and the coffee alone could account for. He raised the coffee mug when he saw her, a greeting that didn't require words. Emma got out of the car with her donut box, and then the front door flew open. The small person who came through it at a speed that suggested she had been standing directly behind it, waiting for some time, had dark hair in 2 imperfect pigtails, a shirt with a horse on it, mismatched socks, and an expression of such complete and concentrated assessment that Emma was immediately, fully and thoroughly evaluated from head to foot before she had taken 3 steps up the driveway. This was Lily Bennett, 8 years old, going on 45 exactly as advertised. "Are those donuts?" Lily said. "They are. What kind?" "Apple cider." Lily looked at the box, then at Emma, then at Noah, then at Emma again. "Dad said you make bread." "I do. I like bread. A beat. Can you do a cartwheel?" Behind her, made a face that Emma interpreted as an apology. Emma set the donut box down on the porch railing, stepped back onto the front path and did a cartwheel. It was not a perfect cartwheel. Her landing was a little, and she had to take a step to catch herself. But it was a cartwheel. Unambiguously, Lily stared at her. And she turned to Noah with an expression of complete vindication. "She can do a cartwheel." "I see that," Noah said. Lily turned back to Emma, and for a moment, just a moment, the assessment paused. And what came through instead was something simple and open and very young. "Do you want to come in?" Lily said. "We have orange juice." Emma picked up the donut box. "I would love to come in." The morning settled into itself. The 3 of them at Noah's kitchen table. Donuts open between them, orange juice in mismatched glasses. Lily talking with the uninhibited velocity of an 8-year-old who has determined that you are acceptable and is now downloading her entire personality directly to you. She told Emma about her class hamster, Gerald, who had escaped twice and been recovered both times behind the same bookshelf, which, she felt, said something about Gerald's limited strategic thinking. She told Emma about the book she was reading, which was about a girl who discovers she can speak to horses, and which she was reading for the 4th time because it was perfect, and she saw no reason to read anything else. She told Emma about the time her dad burned spaghetti, which she described as scientifically impossible but definitely happened. "Spaghetti does not burn," Emma said. "I know," Lily said. "Tell him that." Noah, to his credit, took this with the patience of a man who had told this story on himself before and had made his peace with it. The heat was too high. The water evaporated. "It's not. It was burned spaghetti," Lily said to Emma, with the gravity of a closing argument. Emma pressed her lips together, noted. Noah looked at her. His expression was the particular expression of a man who is being gently humiliated by his 8-year-old and is also, against all logic, grateful for it, because it's filling a room that was empty before, and the filling feels like something. Lily ate 2 donuts. Then she looked at Emma with the direct, unfiltered honesty that children have not yet learned to muffle. "My dad doesn't smile that much," she said, "usually." The table went very quiet. Emma kept her voice steady. "What do you mean?" "Like, when he smiles it's real." "But it's not." Lily looked for the word with the furrowed concentration of someone who takes language seriously. "Not a lot. He smiles more today." Noah set down his coffee. "Lily, I'm just saying it," Lily said, with the blameless certainty of someone who has not yet learned that the truth can also be something you hold. She looked at Emma. "He was really sad for a long time. He doesn't talk about it, but I know, because I live here." Emma looked at the little girl across the table, 8 years old, watching her father with those careful, knowing eyes for long enough to chart the frequency of his smiles. "He talks about you," Emma said. "When he talks about smiling, he talks about you." Lily considered this. Then she nodded, like something had been accounted for correctly. "Okay," she said, and reached for a third donut. Noah, across the table, was looking at Emma. Something had shifted in his face, something that went deeper than the morning conversation, something personal and careful and not entirely comfortable. He looked like a man who had just watched someone handle something precious and fragile and had it handled with more care than he expected. He looked like a man who had not expected to feel seen by a woman and a box of donuts on a Saturday morning. Emma looked back at him, and she held the look this time, instead of dropping it. Something passed between them that was not a conversation, but was also not nothing. Then Lily said, "Can we go to the market?" And the moment stepped aside for the morning, which still had places to be. They walked to the farmer's market 3 blocks away, Lily between them, talking continuously, narrating the neighborhood like a docent who had strong opinions about which houses had good gardens and which did not. She held neither of their hands, which was fine, but she walked in the precise middle, equidistant, which Emma noticed and thought might not be entirely accidental. At the market, Lily pulled Noah toward a stall selling small carved wooden animals, and Emma stood slightly apart, watching the two of them negotiate over a small carved bear that Noah felt was overpriced, and Lily felt was essential, and she felt something she was not entirely prepared for. She felt like she was watching something she wanted to be part of, not as a visitor, not as someone who had dropped in on someone else's life and was grateful for the invitation, but the specific, frightening kind of wanting. That means you are no longer just observing something from a safe distance. You are standing at the edge of something and realizing, without quite meaning to, that you want to step across. And then the fear came, right on schedule, the way it always did, because Emma knew exactly what this feeling meant. She had felt it before, twice before, with men who had also seemed good and kind and real and worth the risk. And both times she had stepped across that edge, and both times the ground had given out beneath her, and she had landed in the familiar country of the locked room with its careful inventory and its evidence and its verdict that she had genuinely thought. Those times maybe she'd been wrong about. She hadn't been wrong. The but had come both times. Her chest tightened. She was still watching Noah crouch down to Lily's level, listening to his daughter make her case about the bear with the same focused attention he'd given Emma at dinner last week, and she thought, he is exactly what he looks like. Which means I should be more afraid. Not less, she thought. The more real this is, the worse it will be when it ends, she thought. I should slow this down. I should find a way to put space between now and whatever comes next. And then Noah looked up, just glanced up from where he was crouching, over his shoulder, and saw her standing there. And he didn't say anything, didn't wave, just saw her, held the look for a moment, and in his face was nothing alarming, nothing that asked too much of her, just simple and direct. I see you, you're still here, I'm glad. Emma breathed, she thought, okay, one morning. I'll stay for one morning. They ate lunch at a taco place. Lily declared the only acceptable lunch option, non-negotiable. Lily constructed her taco with surgical precision, refused salsa on the grounds that she was not interested in disagreeing with her food, and then asked Emma, out of absolutely nowhere, with the terrifying candor of someone who had decided to know you properly, "Why don't you have kids, Lily?" Noah said it quickly, his voice carrying the specific weariness of a father who is deeply familiar with this conversational gear and cannot always predict when it will engage. "It's a real question," Lily said, defending herself. "I'm not being rude. I want to understand things." Emma looked at the little girl for a moment. Then she said, "Simply, I haven't found the right situation yet." Lily thought about this. "My dad said the same thing for a long time, about finding someone to be with. He said the situation wasn't right." She picked up a chip. Then he went to the dinner. Emma did not look at Noah. She could feel him very carefully not looking at her. "So situations change," Lily said, with the decisiveness of someone who has resolved the matter, and ate her chip. The silence after that was the kind that has a lot in it. Emma kept her eyes on her food. She heard Noah exhale very quietly beside her. Not a sigh exactly. More like a breath he'd been holding, carefully released. The afternoon came on slow and golden. That particular late October light that makes everything look like a memory before it's finished happening. They walked back, Lily ahead, carrying the carved wooden bear that Noah had. Of course, Bot swinging it by one arm while she walked and narrating something to herself just below hearing distance. At the front porch, Lily declared she was going in to put the bear in its official home, which was a designated shelf in her room that housed what she called important things, and disappeared inside. Noah and Emma stood on the porch, just the two of them, the morning all around them, winding down. "She likes you," Noah said. "She interrogated me. That's how she likes people." He paused. "She doesn't do that with everyone." Emma looked out at the street, the neighborhood quiet, a dog barking one block over, the ordinary Sunday sound of a Saturday community on its unhurried way. "She said you smile more today," Emma said. Noah was quiet for a moment. "Is she right?" He looked at her. No hesitation. "Yes." She nodded. Let herself receive that, without immediately dismantling it, without reaching for the counter-argument, which was progress. "Noah," she said, "I have to be honest with you about something, okay? She stopped. Started again. "I'm not good at this part. The part where things start to matter. I have a history of," she looked for the honest word, "I have a history of deciding that I'm about to be hurt, and moving first. Pulling back before anyone has a chance to leave." He didn't say anything. Listening. "I don't want to do that to you," she said. "Or to Lily. She's 8. And she's already measuring your smiles. And she exhaled. "I'm not someone who treats people carelessly. Even when I'm afraid. Especially when I'm afraid." Noah looked at her for a long time. "Emma," he said, "I'm going to tell you something. And I need you to hear it the way I mean it, not the way fear will try to translate it." She waited. "I know this is fast," he said. "I know we're both people who have been hurt in ways that didn't finish hurting all at once, and I know that makes this terrifying. I'm terrified too. You're not the only one." He paused. "But I would rather be terrified and honest about it than safe and quiet in a way that just looks like peace from the outside." Emma stared at him. "You said last week that you have a history of pulling back," he said. "I have a history of disappearing into work and telling myself I'm protecting Lily, when actually I'm protecting myself. We're both doing the same thing, just differently." She said nothing. "So I guess what I'm asking," he said carefully, "is whether we could both agree to try not to do the thing we usually do. Just try. See what happens if we stay." She looked at this man, on this porch, in this particular October afternoon. This man who burned spaghetti and bought wooden bears and listened to his 8-year-old daughter with his whole self, and had somehow, in the span of one dinner and one morning, become a person whose opinion of her had started to matter more than she was comfortable with. "You make it sound very simple," she said. "It's not simple at all," he said. "I just think simple is how you have to say it. Or you'll never say it." Emma turned it over in her mind, testing the weight of it, looking for the place it was hollow. She couldn't find one. "Okay," she said. For the second time in 8 days, she said, "Okay" to this man. This time she said it without looking down at the table. She said it looking straight at him. He nodded. And the nod was quiet and settled and had no performance in it whatsoever, which was how she knew he meant it. Inside, through the screen door, she could hear Lily singing something to her new bear. A tuneless, content kind of song that sounded like it had been composed on the spot and was not meant for any audience except the bear and possibly the shelf. Emma listened to it, and for the first time not without fear, because the fear was still there, still present, still doing its careful work in the room she kept locked, but for the first time in longer than she could accurately measure. Emma let herself want something without immediately calculating the cost of losing it. Just for that moment. Just for that particular Saturday. Still unfinished. Still warm. She let herself want it. She stood on the porch and she wanted this small, ordinary, terrifying, specific thing, and she did not take it back. Not yet. 6 weeks. That was how long it took for Emma Carter to stop being surprised every time Noah Bennett actually showed up. 6 weeks of him calling when he said he would call. 6 weeks of him remembering small things, the name of the supplier whose flour she preferred, the fact that she couldn't drink coffee after 2 p.m., or she'd be awake until midnight. The way she always deflected compliments with a joke before she'd allowed herself to fully receive them. 6 weeks of Lily texting her through Noah's phone, with questions that ranged from genuinely curious to completely surreal. What is the longest word you know? And do you think Gerald the hamster is smart, or just lucky? And once at 9:15 on a Wednesday night, simply, what would you do if you could fly? Emma had answered every single one, and every time she did, she felt the walls she'd spent years constructing shift slightly. Not collapse, not dissolve. Just shift. Move an inch in a direction she was trying not to pay too much attention to, because paying too much attention to it would require acknowledging that something was happening that she hadn't budgeted for. It was a Thursday evening in late November when the first real crack appeared. Not between Emma and Noah. The crack was inside Emma, which was both better and significantly worse. She was closing up the bakery, wiping down the prep tables. The familiar end-of-day rhythm of it when her phone buzzed with a text from a number she hadn't thought about in over a year. She looked at the name on the screen. Marcus. Her last relationship. 2 years, ending 14 months ago, in a conversation at a kitchen table that she had replayed so many times the edges of it had gone soft, the way a photograph goes soft when you handle it too much. She stood at her prep table, phone in hand, and she read what he'd written. Hey, heard through the grapevine you're seeing someone. Good for you. Genuinely. I always felt bad about how things ended. That was it. 11 words of explanation for 2 years, and a particular sentence he'd said at that kitchen table that Emma had never quite been able to unhear. A sentence that lived in the locked room. One of the heaviest things in there. She set the phone down. She finished wiping the tables. She picked the phone back up and she called Noah. Not because she'd planned to. Her hands just did it before she'd fully decided. He picked up on the second ring. Hey, you okay? Why do you ask it like that? Because you don't usually call at closing time. You usually text. She sat down on the stool behind the counter. Marcus texted me. A pause. Short. Measured. Who is Marcus? Someone I was with for 2 years. Ended about 14 months ago. She kept her voice even. He wants me to know he feels bad about how things ended. Does he say why things ended? No. Do I get to ask? Emma was quiet for a moment. The bakery was empty around her. The ovens cooling. The smell of the day settling into the walls the way it always did by evening. He said. She stopped. Started again. We had a conversation. At the end. About why it wasn't working. She picked at a dried piece of dough on the counter's edge. He said a lot of things that were probably true from where he was standing. About compatibility. About long-term fit. She stopped again. And then he said one thing that wasn't true. But he said it like it was so obvious he didn't realize he was saying it at all. What did he say? She'd never said it out loud. Not to Diane, not to anyone. She'd carried it alone because saying it out loud gave it more air, and it already had enough. She said it now. He said. Be honest, you knew someone like me was eventually going to want someone more, and then he stopped himself. But Emma, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I knew what came after it. And the worst part was, her voice tightened. Just slightly. The worst part was the way he stopped. Like he'd almost made a mistake. Like the thing after more was so obvious he'd almost said it by accident. Silence on the line. She didn't fill it. Emma, Noah said. And his voice had something in it she hadn't heard from him before. Not anger exactly. Something slower and more deliberate than anger. That was a coward sentence. She hadn't expected that. The worst things people say, he continued, aren't always the ones they finish. Sometimes the ones they stop themselves from finishing are the ones that do the most damage, because they leave you to fill in the blank, and you'll always fill it in the worst possible way. She sat with that. I've been filling it in for 14 months, she said. I know. You don't know what I've been filling it in with. No. But I know it wasn't fair. And I know you believed it. And I know that's part of what you were carrying when you sat across from me at that dinner and whispered what you whispered. The bakery was very quiet. He texted me, she said, because he heard I'm seeing someone. And I don't know why that makes me feel like. She pressed her hand flat on the counter. Like I need to prove something. Or like this isn't real, like I should check it. Somehow. Make sure I'm not just reacting to being chosen, rather than actually wanting to be here. A beat of silence. Then Noah said, "Do you want to be here?" The question landed without preamble, without cushioning, direct as a doorbell. Emma closed her eyes. She thought about Lily, and the carved wooden bear, and the way this man remembered what flower she preferred. She thought about the way she had stood on his porch, and let herself want something without immediately calculating the cost. "Yes," she said. "Okay," he said. "Simple as that. Then that's your answer. That's all the check you need." She exhaled. Something tight released along with it. "You're very calm about this," she said. "I'm not calm," he said. "I am choosing to be calm, because I think that's what this moment needs. It's different." She smiled. She couldn't help it. "Noah." "Yeah. Thank you for picking up, Emma." His voice was steady and certain. "I will always pick up." She didn't respond to Marcus. She deleted the text, set her phone face down on the counter, and finished closing the bakery. But as she drove home that night, she noticed something. The locked room was still there. The evidence was still in it. But the door, which had always felt sealed shut in both directions, keeping things in and keeping her out, felt slightly, fractionally, less locked than it had in a long time. It was the following Saturday when everything that had been slowly building reached a point of real reckoning. Noah had invited Emma to his sister Claire's house for a small family dinner. Just immediate family, he'd said. Just casual. Lily was excited. Claire was cooking too much food, which was her primary love language. Emma had agreed on a Tuesday. By Friday night, she had unagreed with herself at least 14 times. She called Diane. "Talk me down," Emma said, the moment Diane picked up. "What happened tomorrow?" "Dinner, his family." A pause. "Oh, that is not a helpful response." "Diane?" "I know. I'm just a breath." "Emma, this is a good thing. It feels like a test." "It's not a test. It feels like a test." Emma was pacing her kitchen. She did this when she was working something out the back and forth, the rhythm of it. "They're going to look at me and they're going to wonder what he sees. And some of them are going to be polite about the wondering, and some of them might not be. And I'm going to spend the whole night watching people's faces, trying to read whether I'm passing or failing some standard I don't even fully know. And, Emma." "Stop." She stopped. Physically. In the middle of her kitchen. "Do you trust him?" Diane said. "That's not yes or no." She stood there. Thought about the man who always picked up, who remembered her flower supplier, who bought the bear. "Yes," she said. "Then go," Diane said. "Not for his family. Not to pass any test. Go because he asked you to, and because you trust him, and because you're done with the version of yourself that only goes places she already knows she's safe." Emma said nothing. "That version kept you alive for a long time," Diane said, and her voice was softer now. "But it's not keeping you alive anymore. It's just keeping you small." The line sat between them, quiet. "I hate when you're right," Emma said finally. "I know. I find it delightful." Emma wore dark green the next evening. Not the hiding color dark. Something with intention. She drove to Claire's house with the radio on, both hands on the wheel. The now familiar ritual of the parking lot. She gave herself 2 minutes this time instead of 4. Progress. Noah met her outside. Just him, which she understood was deliberate. He'd thought about this. The same way he thought about other things she was still discovering he thought about. "Before we go in," he said. "Okay. Claire is a lot. She shows love through feeding people and asking questions. If anything gets too much, just squeeze my hand. We'll make an excuse and get air. Deal?" Emma looked at him. "You planned an exit strategy. I planned options. Exits are pessimistic. I prefer to call it a contingency." She exhaled something that was half a laugh. "Deal." Inside, it was loud and warm, and smelled like roast chicken and garlic bread. Claire was exactly as advertised, loud and warm and aggressively. Cheerfully present, the kind of person who hands you food before you've sat down and treats your arrival as both expected and wonderful. "Emma," Claire said, and hugged her with the confidence of someone who had been waiting to do this for weeks, which she had. "I have heard so many things about you. All of them made me immediately like you. Come in. Sit down. There is wine." Lily appeared from somewhere in the house, grabbed Emma's hand, and pulled her toward a corner, to show her something. On her tap for a view of a horse, what Lily called an advanced maneuver, which appeared to be a horse simply trotting. But Lily's narration gave it considerable gravitas. Emma sat on the couch with Lily beside her, Noah's hand briefly warm on her shoulder as he passed to help Claire in the kitchen. And she felt against all expectation, against the fear that had been talking loudly all week. She felt something that resembled okay. Something that resembled belonging. Not in the perfect sense, but in the ordinary, imperfect, genuine sense. And then Claire's husband, Robert, sat down in the armchair across from her and said, conversationally, "So you own a bakery?" "That must be hard work, it is," Emma said, "but it's mine." "Which makes it easier." Robert nodded. "Noah says you're the reason he started actually taking lunch breaks." Emma blinked. "He said that?" "He brings your bread to the station. Apparently the other guys are now requesting it by name." Robert smiled. He had the easy, comfortable warmth of a man who had been in a happy household long enough to believe all households could be. Given the right materials, you've had an effect. Emma didn't know what to do with that. She felt the instinct to deflect, to minimize, to redirect. She sat with it instead. Let it be what it was. "He's had an effect too," she said, which was so understated as to be almost funny. Claire called them to the table. 7 people. Passing dishes, talking over each other, in the easy way of a family that has been practicing this particular chaos for years. Lily sat beside Emma and at one point, unprompted, leaned against her arm with the relaxed, trusting weight of a child who has decided you are safe. Emma felt it and went very still for a moment. The way you go still when you are holding something you don't want to disturb. Noah, across the table, saw it. He said nothing, just held her gaze for a moment. Long enough that she understood that he had seen it and that it had mattered to him in a way that was not small. It was after dinner, while Claire was making coffee and Lily was occupied defending a board game territory, that Emma found herself momentarily alone in the hallway with Robert, who was heading toward the kitchen with a stack of dessert plates. He paused. "For what it's worth," Robert said, quietly enough that it was only for her, "I haven't seen him like this since before." He didn't say before what. He didn't need to. I don't mean that as pressure. I mean it as observation. He's lighter, that matters. Emma nodded. She didn't trust her voice entirely. "She'd have liked you," Robert said. Then he continued to the kitchen, easy and unhurried, as though he'd said nothing that rearranged anything. Emma stood in the hallway. She took one long breath. She'd have liked you. She hadn't thought about her, about the space she occupied in this family, in Noah's history, in Lily's life. Not in the real, specific way Robert's sentence required. She'd thought about it in the abstract, of course she had, but this was different. This was someone who had loved that woman, who still carried her, telling Emma that she would have been acceptable, that she would have fit. She stood in that hallway and she understood something she hadn't. Before that moment, she wasn't replacing anyone. She never could and never would. And the family in that dining room wasn't asking her to. They were asking her something much simpler and much harder. To show up. To be real. To stay. She walked back into the dining room. Lily looked up from the board game. "Emma, you're on my team. I don't know how to play this game. I'll tell you what to do." That seems like a reasonable arrangement. Noah watched her sit down. Watched Lily lean in to explain the rules with the focused authority of someone who has strong opinions about how things should be done. And he smiled, the smile Lily had tracked and measured, the one that had a different quality today than it usually did. Emma caught it. She filed it somewhere that was not the locked room. It was nearly 10 o'clock when she drove home. The night was cold and clear, Colorado cold, the sky unreasonably full of stars for a November night. She sat in her driveway for a moment before going in. Not the paralyzed sitting of the parking lot ritual, just sitting. Being still inside a night that had been more than she'd prepared for. Her phone buzzed. "Noah, you doing okay?" She smiled at the screen. Typed back, "More than okay. Robert told me I'm the reason you take lunch breaks." 3 dots. Then, "Robert has a big mouth. I liked it." Pause then. "I'm glad you came tonight." Emma looked up at her own ceiling, invisible in the dark of her car. She thought about Lily's weight against her arm, About Robert's quiet sentence in the hallway, about the locked room and its evidence and the verdict that had felt, for most of her adult life, so airtight. She typed, "Me too." She was about to put the phone down when another message came. "Emma, can I tell you something?" "Yes." She waited. "I haven't brought anyone home since Sarah." A pause. The three dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Not because I was protecting her memory. Because I didn't think I'd find someone who fit the shape of what we are. Lily and me. What our life actually is. Not the cleaned-up version. The dots again. You fit it." Emma read it twice, then a third time. She sat in her dark car with those words on her screen, and she felt something crack open in her chest, not painfully. Not the tearing kind of cracking, but the kind that happens when something that has been sealed for too long finally gets air. The kind of crack that is also an opening. She typed, "I'm scared, Noah." He replied immediately, "Me too. I think that means it's real." She stared at that. It means it's real. She had spent so long treating fear as a signal to retreat, as the warning system that told her to protect herself. Close the door, pull back before the fall. She had never once considered the possibility that fear and realness might be the same thing wearing different coats. She typed, "Good night." He typed back, "Good night, Emma." She went inside. She hung her coat. She stood in her kitchen, and she did something she had not done in a very long time. She let herself imagine something forward, not catastrophically, not with the old mapping of how it would end. She just let herself imagine briefly, carefully, a future that had people in it. Specific people. A man who remembered what flowers she preferred and always picked up. A small girl who measured smiles and asked about cartwheels and leaned against her arm with the trusting weight of someone who had decided, with the efficient confidence of the young, that Emma was safe. She let herself imagine it. Then she went to bed. She slept through the night. It was 2 weeks later when the story Noah Bennett had been carefully, protectively, quietly carrying, finally began to surface. It started without warning. The way the real things always do. They were at Emma's apartment a Sunday evening, Lily at a friend's house, the two of them eating takeout on her couch. The kind of comfortable, Sunday evening ease that had crept up on them without anyone announcing it was happening. They were watching something on television that neither of them was fully paying attention to, and it was quiet, and Noah had that settled quality he had when he was genuinely relaxed, which was not as often as he seemed from the outside. And then the show cut to a hospital scene. Brief, unremarkable, a background detail in a wider plot. A waiting room, a doctor walking through, nothing, graphic or dramatic. Emma wasn't even looking at the screen when she felt it. Noah went still. Not the comfortable still of someone at ease. A different still. A cold front kind of still. The sudden change in pressure that happens before weather. She felt it in the air beside her before she turned to look at him. He was staring at the screen. His face had changed in the way a face changes when the body is suddenly somewhere else, when something on the surface has pulled the person behind it out of the present and somewhere they didn't plan to go. Noah. He didn't respond immediately. Then he blinked, looked at her. His expression resettled, like someone walking back into a room from a long way away. "Sorry," he said. "Don't apologize." She said it simply, without performance. He set his takeout container on the coffee table. He pressed his hands together, elbows on knees, and he looked at nothing in particular for a moment. Emma waited. She was good at waiting. She had learned, over 6 weeks of this man, that he moved toward honesty, but he moved at his own speed, and rushing it produced nothing. Her name was Sarah, he said. She was 34. Emma did not move. It wasn't sudden, he said. That's the thing people don't, it's easier. I think in some ways when it's sudden, you get the shock, and then the grief, and they're separate. When it's not sudden, he stopped. When it's not sudden, the grief starts before it's supposed to, and you're terrified of that, because you feel like you're already betraying someone who's still here. The television was still on. Emma reached over and turned it off without looking. The room went quiet. 14 months, Noah said. From diagnosis to 14 months. He exhaled. Lily was 6 when her mother got sick. She's 8 now. The math she understands because she's excellent at math. The rest of it, he shook his head. The rest of it she processes in ways I watch but can't always follow. The questions she asks. The way she checks on me. 8 years old and she checks on me. Emma felt her throat tighten. I keep asking myself whether I did enough, he said. Whether I was present enough. Whether I managed the fear enough so it didn't contaminate everything. Whether Lily got enough of me during a time when most of what I had was going somewhere else. He pressed his hands together harder. Whether I should have saved something I couldn't save. Noah. She said his name carefully. The way you say something fragile. I know, he said, I know logically. But logic and the 4 a.m. version of this are different conversations. I know they are. He finally looked at her. And in his face was the thing Emma recognized immediately, because she had felt it in her own face many times, the particular expression of someone who has been carrying something for so long they're no longer sure who they are without it. The particular exhaustion of a long-held weight. I don't tell people this, he said, because when you're the firefighter who lost his wife, everyone wants to help, and the help mostly takes the shape of being told, you're doing great. You're so strong, Sarah would be proud, and all of that is kind. And none of it is what you need. What do you need? He looked at her. Someone to know that it's hard, he said. Not was hard. Is hard. On the regular Tuesday night kind of level. Not the dramatic level. Just that I am still in it. That I am doing well and I am still in it. Simultaneously, and both things are true. Emma looked at this man. She thought about her own locked room. Her own long inventory. The years of being told she was fine. Doing great so strong in ways that required her to agree, rather than simply be where she actually was. She reached over and put her hand over his. Both his hands, pressed together, her hand flat on top of them. She didn't say he was doing great. She didn't Sarah would be proud. She didn't fill the space with anything designed to make it more manageable. She said, I know, and then I'm not going anywhere. He looked at her hand on his, then at her face. Emma, he said, and he said it the way someone says a word, when it's holding more than a word usually holds. Like the name itself was carrying something. We're doing the same thing, she said. Quietly, remember? You said it on the porch. We're both carrying things. We both learned to be very quiet about them. We're both here. He turned his hands over beneath hers. Held on. They sat like that in the quiet apartment. The takeout cooling on the coffee table. The television off. The November night doing its dark and patient work outside. Emma did not try to fix it. She didn't try to resolve it or reframe it or find the angle from which it became a lesson. She just sat with him in it, which was, she had come to understand, the most real thing you could do for another person. Not solving, not performing comfort, just being present in the actual room, in the actual weight, in the actual difficulty of the specific truth. After a long while, Noah said, Can I ask you something? Yes. Why do you believe you're not enough for someone? His voice was careful, curious, not clinical, not therapeutic, just genuinely asking in the way of someone who has watched you for weeks and wants to understand the part he hasn't been able to read. Not the Marcus answer, not the surface answer, the real one. Emma was quiet. She had not said it out loud. Not completely. My weight, she said finally. It's always been my weight. Since I was a child. It became the explanation for everything. Why I didn't get picked, why relationships ended, why people looked at me and saw something that needed to be managed or minimized or apologized for. She pressed her other hand into her own lap. And you hear something enough times from enough different directions and you stop questioning whether it's true and you just start organizing your life around it. You build everything so that the thing that hurts you never gets close enough to hurt you again. Noah didn't say anything immediately. And the cruelest part, Emma said, is that it works. The organizing, the walls, they work beautifully. Nothing gets through that you don't let in. She paused, including the things you actually want. He looked at her. You know what I see when I look at you? He said. She braced. Somewhere in her. The old reflex ready for the kind thing that wasn't quite the true thing. The compensating warmth, the yes. But a woman, he said simply, who showed up, who walked through the door when she was terrified, who does cartwheels for 8-year-olds she just met, who sat in a hallway in my sister's house and held something hard without flinching. He held her gaze. That's what I see. I don't see something that needs to be managed. I see someone who already is everything the people in her past were telling her she wasn't. Emma's eyes burned. She did not look away. I'm going to keep getting scared, she said. I know. I'm probably going to pull back sometimes, even when I don't want to. I know that too. And you're going to keep having 4 a.m. conversations with yourself about things you can't change. More than I'd like, he said. So we're both a mess. A fairly functional one, he said. Most days. She laughed. It came out slightly damp at the edges, but it was real. He squeezed her hands, still wrapped in his. Emma, he said, I told you 8 days in that I was choosing you. I need you to understand that wasn't a first date thing. That wasn't the version of something people say and then walk back when the cost becomes clear. She looked at him. I meant it then, he said. I mean it more now. The room held them. Outside, the stars were doing their distant patient work above Colorado. Inside, 2 people with locked rooms and careful habits and long carried weight were doing the terrifying, ordinary, human work of staying in the same place long enough to find out what they were to each other. Not perfectly, not without the fear, not without the history, still doing its residual work in the background. But staying, choosing to stay, which was, Emma was beginning to understand. The whole thing, the entire secret of it. Not the grand gesture or the perfect moment or the absence of fear, just the choosing. Again and again, even when it was hard. Especially then. December came in hard that year. Not the picturesque kind of Colorado December that ends up on calendars, the brutal kind. The kind that reminds you, the mountains don't actually care about your comfort. The kind where the wind has intention, and the cold is a presence rather than a temperature. Emma felt it every morning when she got to the bakery at 4:30, the walk from her car to the back door being exactly long enough to remind her body that warmth was a privilege, not a given. She had been with Noah for 3 months. She said it to herself sometimes. Not out loud, just internally, the way you test a word that still surprises you 3 months. It felt simultaneously longer and shorter than that. Longer because she could no longer remember the specific texture of the days before him with any real clarity. Shorter because she was still, even now, occasionally startled by the fact that he was real, that he kept being real, that Monday became Tuesday, became another week, and he was still there, still calling, still sending her Lily's questions at unreasonable hours, still showing up. Showing up was the thing. Emma had underestimated how much she had stopped expecting it until it kept happening. But December brought something else with it, arriving quietly alongside the cold. A tension Emma couldn't immediately name. Something in Noah that she could feel, but couldn't locate a quality to his silences that was different from his usual silences. A slight distance that hadn't been there in November. Not dramatic. Not the kind of thing that would register to anyone who hadn't spent 3 months learning the specific vocabulary of this particular man. Emma registered it. She said nothing for 5 days. On the 6th day he called her at 7 in the morning, which was unusual, and his voice had the quality of someone who hadn't slept well. Can I come by the bakery this morning, he said. You never have to ask that, I know. I'm asking anyway. He arrived at 8:15, just before the morning rush. Emma handed him coffee from behind the counter without being asked and watched him wrap both hands around the mug and stare into it for a moment before he said anything. Lily's school is having a thing, he said. A winter family event. Next Friday. Elle kept her expression even. Okay. My in-laws will be there. He looked up. Sarah's parents. Tom and Renata Mercer. There it was. Emma had known, abstractly, that Sarah's parents existed. That they were present in Lily's life, that they came for holidays and birthdays, that they were part of the fixed geography of Noah and Lily's world. She had known this, the way you know things you haven't fully imagined yet. They don't know about you, Noah said. Not that I've hidden it. It just hasn't come up, and I didn't know how to. He stopped. Renata is, he chose his words with care. She loved Sarah very much. She is a woman who loves very much and grieves the same way. I don't know how she'll respond. Emma set down the cloth she'd been holding. And you're telling me this now, she said. 6 days after you started being quiet. He looked at her. I noticed, she said. Simply he exhaled. I didn't want to make it a bigger thing than it needed to be. Noah. She kept her voice level. You taught me that being quiet about things is not the same as being at peace with them. I'm allowed to say that back to you. Something in his face shifted, the particular shift of a man who has just been caught in exactly the thing he warned someone else against. A flicker of something that was close to being caught and close to being grateful to be caught. Simultaneously. You're right, he said. I know. She picked the cloth back up. Tell me what you're actually afraid of. He was quiet for a moment. A customer came in. Ordered, left. The bakery did its ordinary morning thing around them. That she'll say something, Noah said finally. Renata. That she'll look at you and say something. Or not say something. Which is sometimes worse. He pressed the mug between his palms. She's not a cruel person. But she's a grieving person. And grieving people don't always know what they're saying until it's already been said. Emma looked at him. And you're afraid, she said slowly, that whatever she says will what? Send me running? He met her eyes. I'm afraid of what it might cost you. She held that. Let it land fully before she responded. Noah, she said, I am a woman who has been hearing difficult things of herself from people who thought they were being honest since I was 11 years old. I have walked through doors I didn't want to walk through and sat at tables that scared me, and I have been choosing, every single day, something that is harder than what I was doing before. She put the cloth down again. I'm not fragile. I need you to stop treating me like I am. He looked at her for a long moment. That was not an easy thing to say, he said. No. Thank you for saying it. Tell Lily, I'll be there. Something in his shoulders came down, almost imperceptibly, the particular physical release of a person who has been holding something they didn't realize they were holding. She'll want to tell you what to wear, he said. For the record, tell her I'm open to suggestions. He left an hour later. Emma went back to her morning. But something had changed in the balance of the morning. Some subtle recalibration. She had said the true thing. Not the careful thing. Not the managed thing. The true thing. And the world had not cracked open. She was beginning to understand that it usually didn't. The Friday evening of Lily's school event arrived wrapped in the particular chaos of a school gymnasium decorated for winter by people doing their enthusiastic best with a limited budget paper snowflakes. Folding tables. 30 children performing a level of coordinated movement that only technically qualified as choreography. Emma found it immediately. Completely charming. Lily found Emma the moment she walked in, materializing out of the crowd, with the navigational efficiency of an 8-year-old on a mission. You wore green, Lily said, with the satisfied authority of someone whose wardrobe consultation had been followed precisely. I take direction well. I know. Lily grabbed her hand. Come on. We sit in the third row. First row is too close. Second row still gets spit from Jordan Marshfield when he sings. I have tested this theory. Emma let herself be pulled. She was aware, in her peripheral vision, of Noah a few steps behind her, and she was aware, further back, of two people she hadn't been introduced to yet, a man with a quiet bearing and a woman with dark eyes and a quality of watchful attention that Emma could feel across the gymnasium. She kept her focus on Lily. The performance lasted 45 minutes. Lily's class sang 3 songs, the third of which appeared to involve hand motions that Lily had not mentioned during any of the advance briefings, but which she executed with great seriousness. Emma watched the whole thing with the focused attention of someone who understood that this was being monitored from multiple directions and who had decided to simply be fully present rather than perform being present, which were different things. When it was over and the gymnasium dissolved into the warm chaos of parents and cookies and children, suddenly released from the tension of public performance, Noah appeared at Emma's elbow. Come meet Tom and Renata, he said, quietly, for her ears only. She squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, she went. Tom Mercer was tall and unhurried, with the kind of weathered, patient face that suggested a life spent outdoors and a personality that did not often raise its voice. He shook Emma's hand and said he'd heard she made good bread, which Noah had apparently discussed at some point. And something about the unceremonious simplicity of the opening made Emma like him immediately. Renata was different. Renata Mercer was a woman in her early 60s with dark eyes that were clearly the origin point of Sarah's eyes, and by extension, Lily's. She was put together in the careful way of a woman who understands that appearance is a form of communication, and she looked at Emma in the direct, measuring way of someone for whom pleasantness and honesty were not always the same thing. "Emma," she said. "Not warm, not cold. Somewhere in the careful middle." "Mrs. Mercer," Emma said, "it's nice to meet you. Noah tells me you own a bakery." "I do, about 20 minutes from here." Renata nodded. Her eyes moved to Noah, then back to Emma. The look was brief and efficient and carried a great deal inside it. "Lily seems very taken with you," Renata said. "Lily is extraordinary. You can't spend time with her and not be taken with her." Something flickered in Renata's face. Quickly. Gone quickly. But Emma caught it, the involuntary softening that happens when someone says something true about a person you love. "She is," Renata said, more simply. Something under the guardedness adjusted itself. Tom had drifted toward Lily, who was now showing him something on someone's phone. Renata and Emma stood slightly apart from the rest. Noah was close enough to intervene if needed, far enough to let it be what it needed to be. "Can I ask you something?" Renata said. "Of course. Are you serious about this?" Her eyes were direct, not unkind, exactly as honest as Noah had warned. "About him. About Lily." Emma did not look at Noah. She kept her eyes on Renata. "Yes," she said, "because Lily is not." Renata stopped. Started again. "She has already lost enough. She is 8 years old, and she has already lost more than a child should lose. If this is something casual—" "It isn't," Emma said. Renata studied her. The studying was uncomfortable. The way real attention is uncomfortable. "She talks about you," Renata said finally. "When we call. She mentions you. She told me you did a cartwheel. Despite everything." Emma almost smiled. "First time we met. She remembers things that matter to her." Renata's voice was quieter now. The armor still there, but adjusted. "She's been talking about you for weeks." Emma waited. "I am not trying to be difficult," Renata said. "I want you to understand that. I am trying to love the people I have left to love, and not lose any more of them. That's all this is." Emma looked at this woman, this grieving, fierce, careful woman, who was standing in a school gymnasium trying to protect the last piece of her daughter she still had access to. "I understand," Emma said. "I'm not asking you to trust me today. That's not how trust works, and you know that better than most people. I'm just asking you to let it develop." She paused. "Give it the time it needs, that's all." A long silence. Lily's laugh cut across the gymnasium from where she was with Tom. Renata looked toward the sound, the way she always did, the instinctive, reflexive turn of someone for whom that laugh was connected to something irreplaceable. "She sounds like her mother when she laughs," Renata said. Very quietly. Not to Emma. Really. Just aloud. Emma said nothing, because there was nothing to say that would improve on the silence. After a moment, Renata looked back at her. Something had shifted in the dark eyes. Not softened entirely, but moved. "The bread," Renata said. "Noah brought some to Christmas 2 years ago." Before she stopped. Before. Sarah loved it. We didn't know then where it came from. Emma stared at her. "What bakery?" Emma asked carefully. "Carter's," Renata said. "It's what the bag said. We always meant to go, but never Carter's bakery." Emma's bakery. The room seemed to adjust around her. A strange, tilting quality to the moment. The kind that happens when two separate lines of a life suddenly, unexpectedly intersect at a point you never anticipated. "That's my bakery," Emma said. Renata went very still. "That's my bread," Emma said. That she had. The two women looked at each other, and in the space between them, in the middle of a school gymnasium full of noise and paper snowflakes and 100 ordinary family moments, something happened that neither of them had planned, that couldn't have been arranged or predicted or manufactured. Renata's eyes filled. Not spilling over. Just filled. The very specific filling of eyes that happens when something unexpected touches something deep. "She would have come to your bakery," Renata said. Her voice was careful in the way voices get when they're working hard to stay level. "She always meant to." She wrote it down. She had a list. She stopped. She kept a list of places she wanted to go. The bakery was on it. Emma felt the back of her own throat tighten. "I'm sorry," Emma said. And she meant it in the full, true, unornamented way. No performance. Just honest sorrow for a woman she'd never met who had loved the people Emma was learning to love. Renata nodded. She pressed her lips together, collected herself with the practiced efficiency of a woman who had been collecting herself for 2 years. Then she did something Emma hadn't expected. She put her hand, briefly, on Emma's arm. "Take care of them," Renata said. Not a warning this time. Something else. A request, the specific kind of request that costs the person making it something real. "I will," Emma said. Noah had seen it from across the gymnasium. She knew because when she looked up, he was watching with an expression she hadn't seen on his face before, something raw and undefended and deeply, quietly moved. He didn't say anything, he didn't need to. Tom returned with Lily, who had apparently just beaten him at some phone game and was conducting herself accordingly. The rest of the evening moved with the ordinary warmth of people finding their way toward each other, imperfectly and genuinely, which is the only honest way it ever happens. In the car going home, Lily already half asleep in the back seat. The bear Theo tucked beside her because she'd been through a phase of bringing him everywhere, and they'd all simply accommodated it. No. A hand on the wheel, and after a long quiet, he said, "What did she say to you?" Emma was looking out the passenger window at the dark Colorado night going by. "She told me Sarah had my bread before she died," Emma said. She was on a list of places Sarah wanted to visit. The car was very quiet. "I didn't know that," Noah said. "I know." He drove. "Does it feel strange?" he asked. Emma considered. Turned it over honestly. "No," she said. "It feels like I don't know how to say this without it sounding like more than it is. But it feels like I was always supposed to be connected to this family somehow. Like it was already threaded in, before I even knew it." Noah said nothing for a moment. Then, "Sarah would have liked you." It was the same thing Robert had said 2 months ago in the hallway. But coming from Noah, in the dark of this car, on this particular night, it landed with completely different weight. Emma looked at him. "How do you know?" she asked. "Because she had this," he paused. "She had this radar for people who were the real version of themselves. She couldn't stand performance. She always said she could feel when someone was pretending, and it physically bothered her." He glanced at Emma briefly. Eyes back on the road. "You never perform. Even when you're scared. Even when it would be easier to. You're always just you." She would have clocked that in about 4 minutes and decided you were non-negotiable. Emma felt something move through her that was not a word, and not quite a feeling. Some combination of loss for a woman she never met and gratitude for the breadcrumb trail that woman's life had laid, without knowing it, toward this moment in a dark car on a December night. "Non-negotiable is high praise," Emma said quietly. "It's the highest she had." Lily stirred in the back seat, mumbled something that included the word Gerald, and then settled again. Both of them heard it. Both of them almost laughed, and didn't, out of deference to the particular tenderness of the moment. It was 2 days later when the thing Emma had been quietly managing, the thing she'd been careful and self-aware and deliberately honest about, decided it was done being managed. It happened without a notable trigger. A Sunday afternoon, Noah at a shift that ran long, Emma at the bakery doing prep work for the week. She was alone in the back, the radio on, the familiar rhythm of the work going, and somewhere between measuring and mixing, a thought came through that was different from the usual background static. Not the fear, not the locked room and its inventory. A different kind of thought. A thought that said, he is going to see all of it eventually. Every piece. And when he does, he might. She stopped mixing. She stood at the table, and she realized she was doing it again. Not the pulling back before the fall. Something more specific. She was anticipating the moment Noah would fully see her, not just the brave parts. Not just the parts she'd been able to be honest about, but the complete picture. The full inventory of the locked room. The deepest layer of the damage. The piece she hadn't let anyone close enough to see, because she had never said it all out loud. Not even to Noah, who had heard more than anyone else. There was a piece she was still holding. She knew what it was. It was the Christmas dinner when she was 17. Her grandmother's house. The whole extended family gathered, and her Aunt Patricia had made a joke, a light, passing, meant to be humorous comment about Emma's plate that had made the table laugh. The polite, restrained laugh of people who felt they were supposed to find it funny. And Emma had laughed too, because you did. Because what was the alternative? Except her cousin Michael hadn't laughed. Michael, who was 14 and generally inarticulate on the subject of feelings, had looked around the table with an expression of clear, quiet discomfort, and then looked at Emma and said, with no social calculation whatsoever, "That wasn't funny. Are you okay?" And Emma, 17 years old, practiced at disappearing, already an expert at the tight smile, and the redirect had looked at her 14-year-old cousin and felt something crack directly open in her chest. She had said, "I'm fine," and changed the subject and spent the rest of the evening performing fine with professional-grade precision. But the crack had never fully closed. Because the crack was not about the joke. The crack was the realization that she had been so thoroughly trained to perform fine that when someone actually asked, when someone looked straight at her and said, "Are you okay?" without the polite cushioning of indirection she had no answer for, it. She had no self underneath the performance who knew how to respond. She had spent 15 years since then slowly, painstakingly, imperfectly finding that self. Building her, brick by brick. The bakery was part of it. Diane was part of it. And now Noah was part of it, and Lily, and the whole terrifying, necessary project of being known. But she hadn't said this to him. She hadn't told him about the Christmas dinner, or about Michael's question, or about the 15-year excavation of a self that her own family had spent years burying under helpful comments about her potential. She hadn't told him that the locked room wasn't just about romantic rejection. That it was bigger and older and more foundational than that. That it had started long before Tyler in the Taco Bell parking lot or Marcus at the kitchen table. She hadn't told him because telling him meant being seen at the actual root of the thing, not just the branches. She stopped. She looked at the bowl in front of her. She picked up her phone and called him. It went to voicemail. He was on shift. She left a message that said, "When you're done tonight, can you come by? There's something I want to tell you. Not bad, just important. And I'm done, waiting to say it." She hung up. She went back to her dough. Her hands were steadier than she expected. He texted at 9:47, "Coming." He was at her door by 10:15. He looked like a man who had driven with some urgency, because he had. She let him in and gave him coffee, and they sat at her kitchen table and she told him. All of it. The Christmas dinner. 17-year-old Emma. Michael's question in the middle of a laughing table. The 15 years of excavation. The understanding she'd reached, slowly and without fanfare, that the locked room wasn't about her weight, or about the men who'd left. Those were symptoms. Not the root. The root was earlier. The root was being in a family that loved her, and had no idea they were teaching her to disappear. Who thought they were just making jokes, who didn't know that one kind of repeated message, delivered over years by people you trust, becomes the voice you hear in your own head long after the people have stopped speaking. She told him, and she did not cry, which surprised her, because she had expected to. Instead, she felt something more like clarity, the specific relief of something that has been in the dark for a long time being brought into a room with enough light to finally see it properly. Noah listened. He didn't fill the silences. He didn't rush to reassure or reframe. He sat across from her at the kitchen table at 10:30 on a December night, and he let her say all of it, and he heard it without managing it, which was all she'd ever needed from another person, and the thing she'd almost stopped believing anyone would give her. When she was done, he said, "How old were you the first time someone in your family said something?" She thought about it. 8, she said. Same age as Lily, he absorbed that. "I look at Lily," he said, quietly, "and I think about what it would cost her to hear that. At 8, from someone she trusted. It costs a lot," Emma said. "And it compounds." "I know." A silence. "Emma," he said, "I want to say something, and I want you to hear it without deflecting, and without the reflex and without the room that holds all the evidence against it. Can you do that?" She looked at him. "I'll try," she said. "You were never the problem," he said. "Not at 8. Not at 17, not at 32. You were a child in a room full of adults who didn't know they were teaching you to be ashamed of yourself. And then you were an adult carrying lessons you were never supposed to learn. And everything you've done since the bakery. The walls. The way you still walk through every door anyway, all of that is you. The real you. Not a damaged version. Not a project, you. She pressed her hands together in her lap. The woman who did the cartwheel, he said. Who answered Lily's questions about flying at 9:15 on a Wednesday? Who stood in front of Renata Mercer and didn't flinch? Who called me tonight instead of sitting alone with it? He held her gaze. That's who you've been building for 15 years. And she's Emma. She's extraordinary. You need to know that. Emma sat very still. The walls were there. The reflex was there. The practice deflection, ready to deploy. She didn't use it. She sat with he'd said. Let it be in the room. Let it be real. Okay, she said. Very quietly. Okay? I believe you, she said, or I'm choosing to believe you, which might not be the same thing yet. But I'm choosing it. He nodded. Something in his face settled into something quiet and deep. The specific expression of a man who has been holding something together with great care and has just watched it hold on its own. That's enough, he said. That's everything. She looked at this man across her kitchen table. This tired, good man who had showed up because someone asked him to and had kept showing up every day since. Who had his own locked room, his own long-carried weight, his own 4 a.m. conversations with things that couldn't be resolved. Who was choosing every day to stay? Noah, she said. Yeah, I love you. She said it before she'd fully decided to say it, which meant it was the truest possible version of the thing. No calculation. No strategic timing. Just the word, accurate and out loud. He looked at her, and the look on his face was the kind that doesn't need translation. The specific, undefended, absolutely certain look of a man who has been waiting for something and has just been handed it. I love you, he said. I have for a while. How long? Since the cartwheels, he said. She laughed. A real one. Room-filling kind that Diane had always talked about. He laughed too. And in the kitchen, in the December night, in the specific warmth of a table where two people had just told each other the truth, in the fullest version of it, everything was not fixed. The locked room was still there. The weight was still there. The 4 a.m. conversations were still there. But the door to the room was open, for the first time in 15 years, and the light getting in was enough. The new year arrived without ceremony. Emma had expected to feel different on January 1st. She didn't. She woke up at 4:15 the same way she always did. Lay in the dark for a moment, taking stock of herself, and determined that she was the same person she'd been the night before, which was both ordinary, and, when she thought about it, quietly remarkable, because the person she'd been the night before was someone who had said, I love you to a man who said it back, and the world had not ended, and the locked room door was still open. And she was still here. Still here was enough. She got up and made bread. January settled into itself around them the way a month does when it knows it has nowhere urgent to be. Noah's shifts ran long in winter, more calls. Colder response conditions. The particular strain of a fire station in a Colorado community that had learned to brace itself between November and March. Emma learned the rhythm of his schedule, the way she'd learned the rhythm of her ovens, not by being told but by paying attention. She learned which days he was depleted and needed silence, and which days he needed to talk. And she learned to read the difference in the first 30 seconds of a phone call without him having to say anything. He was learning her too. She could feel it, the specific quality of being observed with care, being studied not to find the weakness, but to understand the shape. He noticed when she was bracing for something she hadn't said yet. He noticed when the deflection reflex came up and gave her the space to override it herself before he said anything. He noticed when a good day caught her off guard, when something went well and the old habit of waiting for the reversal kicked in before she'd had a chance to just let the good thing be good. You're doing it again, he said one Saturday morning in mid-January. They were at her kitchen table, coffee between them, Lily still asleep in the spare room that had gradually become, without any formal announcement, Lily's room when she stayed over. Emma looked up. Doing what? The wait. He wrapped his hands around his mug. You got the call yesterday about the wholesale account. He meant the restaurant account she'd been trying to land for 4 months. The one that would require her to expand her morning production, hire another person, take on real infrastructure she'd been afraid to take on because taking it on meant the bakery was not just surviving, but growing, which meant it could also be lost in a way that survival didn't expose. The call was good, Emma said carefully. The call was better than good. They want a meeting next week. He looked at her. And you've been waiting since yesterday for the other shoe. She said nothing. There is no other shoe, he said. There's always Emma. He said it quietly. Let it be good. She looked at her coffee. She thought about what he'd said in December about the woman she'd been building for 15 years, about choosing to believe something even when you're not all the way there yet. She looked up.
It was a really good call.
Yes, he said. It was. And I'm terrified. That's fine. Both things can be true. She exhaled. Let the good thing and the fear sit in the same room without evicting either of them, which was, she was learning the actual skill. Not fearlessness. Cohabitation. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway at that moment, wearing mismatched socks and the expression of someone who had been awake for longer than she was letting on and had been listening with interest. Is the bakery getting bigger? Lily asked. Noah looked at Emma. Emma looked at Lily. Maybe, Emma said. Can I come help sometime? Gerald's class is doing a project on jobs. I want to show them a real bakery. Gerald is a hamster, Noah said. Gerald is very intellectually curious, Lily said, with great dignity, and walked to the refrigerator. Emma caught Noah's eye. He was smiling. The high-frequency smile. The one Lily tracked. Emma filed it. Not in the locked room. Somewhere else. Somewhere with a much better view. It was the last week of January when Claire called Noah at 6 a.m, which meant something had happened. Emma was at her bakery when Noah called her at 6:40. His voice had the careful, controlled quality she now recognized as him actively managing his own reaction, so it didn't flood the conversation. My dad had a cardiac event overnight, he said. He's stable. He's at St. Anthony's. Claire is with him. Are you going? I'm going. Take Lily to my bakery, Emma said. She had already turned to the back, already calculating. She can stay with me until you know what you're dealing with. Don't think about logistics. Just go. Of silence. Emma, Noah. Go. I've got her. He got her to the bakery by 7:30. Lily came in with her backpack and her tablet and the carved wooden bear, which she brought in her arms with the seriousness of someone who understood that some situations required backup. She sat at the small table in the corner that Emma had quietly set up with a stool and some extra counter height that was, coincidentally, exactly right for an 8-year-old, and she watched Emma work with the focused attentions she gave everything she decided mattered. They didn't talk about Noah's dad for the first hour. They talked about bread, about why sourdough takes longer, about the way yeast works, about the difference between a crust that's right and one that's gone too far. Emma explained it the way she always did when Lily was listening completely, without the condescension that adults often installed in explanations aimed at children. Lily absorbed it with the seriousness she gave things she considered worth absorbing. At 9 o'clock, Lily looked up from her tablet and said, Is Grandpa Frank going to be okay? Emma stopped what she was doing. She looked at this 8-year-old, who had already once been in the position of waiting for news about someone's health, and learning that sometimes the news didn't come back the way you needed it to. I don't know yet, Emma said. Your dad is going to call when he knows more. And your grandpa is being taken care of by people whose whole job is to help him. Lily nodded slowly. Okay. Are you scared? A pause. The kind that meant she was actually consulting her internal state rather than giving the socially acceptable answer. A little, Lily said. I don't like waiting. Me neither, Emma said. I'm very bad at waiting. You seem okay at it. I'm performing okay at it. There's a difference. Lily thought about this. That's like when I pretend. I'm not scared on the first day of school. Exactly like that. It works though, the pretending. Because if you act like you can handle something, sometimes you can. Emma looked at this child, 8 years old, already excavating her own interior with the precise tools of someone who has been paying careful attention. Sometimes you can, Emma agreed. Noah called at 11:17. His father had had a significant but survivable event, blocked artery. Procedure done, resting and stable, and being monitored but expected to be home within the week. Noah's voice had the quality of a man who had been holding his breath for 5 hours and had just been given permission to exhale. "Tell Lily," he said. Emma passed the phone to Lily, who took it with both hands and held it very close to her face, which was the physical posture she took when something mattered. "Is he okay?" Lily said. And then, okay, Dad, yeah, okay. And then after a pause, in the voice she used when she was being brave about something, "I know. Me too." She handed the phone back to Emma. Emma took it. "She's good. She's been teaching me about hamster cognition." Noah made a sound that was not quite a laugh but was related to one. "Emma." His voice had something in it she hadn't heard in exactly this combination before. Not just gratitude. Something more foundational than that. "I don't know how to." "You don't have to," she said. "Go be with your dad, we'll be here." After she hung up, Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up the wooden bear, turned it over in her hands the way she did sometimes, when she was processing something. "Emma," she said. "Yeah. Are you going to stay? Like, permanently?" The question arrived without warning. The particular directness of children who have learned that adults sometimes need to be asked plainly, because they won't always volunteer the answer otherwise. Emma set down what she was holding. She looked at this 8-year-old girl. This specific, remarkable, watchful small person who's tracked smiles and rescued hamster reputations, and brought her bear to difficult situations and asked the real question, always without apology. "I'm working on it," Emma said. "Is that okay?" Lily thought about it with the seriousness she gave things that deserved it. "Yeah," she said. "That's okay." And then, "I hope you do though, so do I," Emma said. And she meant it in the full, unhedged, terrifying, wonderful way. February arrived and brought with it the particular cruelty it reserved for Colorado, a beautiful week. Temperatures almost gentle, followed by a storm that shut the county down for 36 hours and canceled everything on both of their schedules and left them stranded, individually in their separate spaces with too much time and the telephone. They talked for 4 hours on the first night of the storm. Not about anything pressing. About things neither of them had mentioned before childhood memories. The particular strangeness of becoming an adult. The books they'd meant to read and hadn't. The trips they'd imagined and never taken. They talked the way people talk when they've run out of performative conversation and landed in the actual country of knowing each other. Noah told her about the summer he was 12 and convinced himself he was going to be a marine biologist. This lasted 3 weeks before he realized Colorado was landlocked, which he'd technically known, but the reality of it hadn't fully registered until his father pointed out with the dry patience of a man who was committed to his son learning useful things from his own mistakes. Emma told him about the year she was 19 and tried to go to culinary school in Denver and lasted 4 months before a chef instructor told her the industry was brutal and she'd be better served finding something more forgiving. And she'd walked out of that class and driven home and spent a weekend deciding whether he was right and concluded he wasn't, and enrolled in a business course instead and spent 3 years saving and planning before she opened Carter's Bakery at 26. 6 years before this conversation, in a space that had previously been a struggling sandwich shop, whose owner was relieved to let it go. "So the instructor told you to quit," Noah said. "He did, and you didn't." "I did not." "Emma." His voice had something warm and specific in it. "You walked out of a class where someone told you that you weren't suited to the thing you loved, and drove home, and spent a weekend thinking it over, and then went and built the thing anyway. It wasn't dramatic, it was absolutely dramatic. You just did it quietly, which is somehow more impressive." She sat with that. "You do this thing," he said, "where you describe your own courage in the most minimal possible terms. Like, the less dramatic you make it sound, the less credit you have to take for it." She didn't answer immediately. "Old habit," she said. "I know." He paused. "You're allowed to take credit for the things you've built. The bakery. The way you've shown up in the last 4 months. All of it." She looked at the ceiling of her apartment. The storm outside doing its relentless, patient work. "I'm practicing," she said. "You're doing well." How would you know? You're biased. Completely, he said, still accurate. She smiled at the ceiling. Noah, she said. Yeah. I'm glad Diane couldn't take no for an answer. A pause, she could hear him smiling on the other end. Me too, he said. Please never tell her I said that. Absolutely not, Emma said. She would be insufferable. Permanently insufferable. There would be no recovering from it. We'd have to move. Different state, he agreed. She laughed. He laughed. The storm continued outside. And in the quiet that followed the laughing, in the comfortable, undemanding quiet of two people at ease in the same silence, Emma felt something that she needed to name before it became something she'd edited. She felt at home. Not in the apartment, in the space between them, in the specific, irregular shape of this thing they were building, imperfect and honest and always surprising and shot through with the particular light of two people who had learned to be afraid of exactly this and were doing it anyway. She felt at home. She didn't say it out loud that night. She kept it, held it warm. She would tell him later. She had time. The twist came in March, the kind that arrives without a warning sign, the kind that is so specific and precise in its timing that it reorders everything that came before it. It started with Emma's mother. Diane called on a Tuesday afternoon not to meddle, which was unusual enough to be its own signal. Her voice had the careful quality of a friend who is about to say something that requires delivery. Your mom called me, Diane said. Emma set down the spatula. Why? Because she couldn't get you. Your phone's been going to voicemail all morning. Emma had been in production. She always turned the ringer off in production. Her mother knew this. What did she want? A pause. She's coming to visit. Next month. She wants to meet Noah. Emma's mother, Linda Carter, lived in Phoenix. She was a small woman with strong opinions and a profound love for her daughter that had always coexisted, somewhat uncomfortably, with a set of ideas about Emma's life that she had been offering unsolicited since Emma was approximately old enough to understand language. Linda was not cruel. She was also not always careful. She had been the source of several of the items in the locked room, not the biggest ones, not the ones with the heaviest weight, but present in there nonetheless. Items delivered with love, items that hurt with love, which was its own category of complicated. She can't come, Emma said. Emma, it's not the right time. When will it be the right time? Emma pressed her hand flat on the counter. She thought about the work of the last 5 months, about the doors she'd walked through, about the locked room and its open door, and the light getting in. I need to talk to Noah first, she said. She called him that evening. She told him plainly. Her mother. The visit, the history. What are you afraid of? He asked. I'm afraid she'll say something, Emma said. She does this thing where she means to be encouraging, and the encouragement sounds like a repair project. Like she's glad I found someone, because now maybe I'll get fixed. And she doesn't know she's doing it. She genuinely doesn't. But it's the thing that started the locked room, he said quietly. Not all of it, but some of it. He was quiet for a moment. Invite her, he said. Emma stared at the wall. Emma. His voice was steady. You cannot close the door now. You've been opening it for 5 months. Your mother is not the enemy. She's just someone who loves you badly sometimes, and she needs to see what you've built. What if she? Then we handle it, he said. Together. That's what this is. Together. She sat with that word. She thought about being 17 at a Christmas dinner performing fine with no one to stand beside her. She thought about now. Together, she said. Together, he confirmed. Simple as that. Linda Carter arrived on a Friday afternoon in early April. She was 61 years old and looked like Emma would have looked if Emma had spent 30 years in the Arizona sun and had inherited their father's tendency toward worry, expressed as practical action. She came with a suitcase, a casserole dish she'd brought from Phoenix in a cooler because she didn't trust that Emma was eating properly, and the specific energy of a woman who had something on her mind and was not entirely certain how to begin. They hugged at the door. The hug was genuine. Whatever history lived between them, the love was real and had always been real, which was the thing that made the history so complicated. You look good, Linda said, pulling back, looking at Emma with the maternal assessment that missed nothing. You look different. Different how? Like something settled, Linda said. And she said it carefully, like she was testing whether it was true. Maybe something did, Emma said. They met Noah and Lily for dinner that Friday. A restaurant, neutral ground. The geography of a public table being its own kind of structure. Emma watched her mother meet Noah with the specific attention of someone who is waiting for the data to confirm or deny a hypothesis they've been running privately for months. Noah shook Linda's hand and said it was good to finally meet her, and Linda looked at him with the assessing eyes Emma knew well. And then something unexpected happened. Linda liked him immediately. Emma could see it, the specific relaxation of a person who has been braced and has just been given permission to stand. Noah was polite and direct and asked Linda questions about Phoenix and actually listened to the answers. And Linda, who was a woman who could detect performance from a considerable distance, detected none. Lily told Linda a detailed account of Gerald's most recent escape, which Linda received with the full engagement of a woman who had been missing grandchildren she didn't have yet and who had just been unexpectedly handed a child-shaped gift. Emma watched all of this from her own chair. She felt something complex and not entirely simple. Gratitude, yes, but also something protective and old, the part of her that had spent years managing her mother's access to her life, keeping her at a careful distance, because closeness meant more opportunities for the specific comments left in the locked room. The part of her that was afraid that dinner would proceed well, right up until the moment it didn't. The moment came over dessert. It came the way Linda's moments always came, not with malice, not with intent, just with the momentum of a woman who had been carrying a thought and had found a pause long enough to set down. Emma, Linda said, and her voice had a quality that Emma recognized. The quality of a reckoning. I want to say something. The table went quiet. Noah's hand, under the table, found Emma's knee. Not gripping, not protective, just present. Just, I'm here. I know, Linda said, that I haven't always said things the right way. She was looking at Emma, not at Noah, not at Lily, at her daughter. I know that some of the things I said when you were growing up, I meant them one way, and they landed another way. And I know I didn't always notice the difference fast enough to fix it. Emma said nothing. I'm saying this now, Linda continued, because you look like someone who has put something down. Something heavy. And I know you've been carrying it for a long time. And I know some of it. She stopped, her eyes, to Emma's complete surprise, filled slightly. Some of it I put there. And I'm sorry for that. The restaurant continued around them. The ordinary noise of a Friday dinner, oblivious to what was happening at this particular table. Emma looked at her mother, Linda Carter, who had spent 32 years loving her daughter in all the ways she knew how, which were not always the ways Emma needed, who had made the locked room worse without knowing it, and was now, in a restaurant in Colorado in April, looking at her daughter and asking, with her eyes, for something that neither of them had words for yet. Emma reached across the table and put her hand over her mother's. I know, Mom, she said. I know you meant it the other way. Linda's hand turned over and held Emma's. They stayed like that for a moment. Nothing resolved. Because these things don't resolve over one restaurant dinner, but something acknowledged. Something moved. Lily, who had been watching with the solemn attention she gave things she sensed were important even when she didn't have the full context, leaned toward Linda and said, Emma made my dad smile more. Linda looked at the small girl. Then she looked at Noah. Then she looked at Emma, and she said, very quietly, good. The April evening that followed had the quality of something that had been tightly coiled finally easing. They walked after dinner, Lily between Linda and Emma, talking about Gerald with the narrative confidence of an author who has found a new reader. Noah walked beside Emma, close enough that their arms touched, and he said nothing, which was the right thing. He was very good, she had learned, at saying nothing at exactly the right moments. It was later, after Lily was with Noah's sister and Linda was settled at Emma's apartment, that mother and daughter sat in the kitchen with tea and the specific quiet of an old conversation that was ready to become something different. Tell me about him, Linda said, not with agenda, just with a mother's wanting to know. So Emma told her. Not the careful version. Not the version she'd have told 6 months ago, the true one. She told her about the restaurant bathroom where she'd nearly climbed out a window. She told her about the cartwheel and the donuts and Lily's question about flying. She told her about December and Renata Mercer in the school gymnasium and the impossible, unplannable thread of the bakery connecting them to Sarah's life. She told her about saying, "I love you" before she'd fully decided to. Linda listened to all of it without interrupting, which was not always easy for Linda, and which therefore cost her something, and Emma noticed and appreciated it. When Emma was done, Linda was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You always were braver than you believed." Emma looked at her. "Stubborn," Linda continued. "Hard-headed. You got that from your father. But brave." She wrapped both hands around her mug. "I don't think I told you that enough. I told you about potential. I told you about what you could be. I should have told you more about what you were." Emma felt the familiar tightening in her throat. "You were extraordinary," Linda said. "Even then, even at 11 and 17 and all the years I spent trying to improve things about you that didn't need improving." She looked at her daughter directly. "I'm sorry it took me this long to say it plainly." Emma pressed her lips together. She thought about the locked room, about the evidence, about the 15-year excavation of a self. She thought about the door standing open and the light getting in. "It's okay, Mom," she said, and meant it. Not as a performance of forgiveness, as the actual thing, the real version, which required knowing that her mother's love was real, even when its expression was imperfect, and that imperfect love was still love, and that people carried what they were given and learned better when they learned better, and sometimes said so over tea on an April night. "It's okay," she said again. The following Saturday was the day Emma hadn't seen coming. Not because it was dramatic, because it was the opposite. Noah came by the bakery at closing time. He had Lily with him. Lily was carrying something, a paper, or a card, held with both hands in the careful way she carried things she considered important. Emma came out from the back. Lily walked to the counter and placed the card on it with the seriousness of a person completing a formal transaction. Emma looked at it. It was a drawing. Crayons. The way Lily's drawings always were. 3 figures. A tall man, a medium woman in a blue dress, the blue dress, unmistakably, and a small girl with pigtails. Above them, in the careful capital letters she always used, it said, "Our family." Emma stared at it. She heard Lily say, "You don't have to frame it or anything. I have 6 more at home. I just wanted you to have one." Emma looked up from the drawing. Lily's face was absolutely serious, the face she wore when she had decided something and was presenting it as concluded matter. "Lily," Noah said, quietly, checking. "She should know," Lily said simply. "People should know when they belong somewhere." Emma pressed her hand over her mouth for a moment. She was not going to cry in her own bakery. She had standards. She failed entirely. She came around the counter and crouched down to Lily's level, and Lily, who had been expecting some form of acknowledgement, seemed mildly surprised by the completeness of the embrace, but recovered quickly and hugged back with the practical, wholehearted efficiency of a small person who had decided this was exactly right. Over Lily's shoulder, Emma looked up at Noah. He was watching the two of them, and on his face was the specific, unguarded, deeply quiet expression of a man who has been putting something back together for 2 years and has just watched it become whole. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Emma stood up. She held the drawing. She looked at the 3 crayon figures in the blue dress and the pigtails and the tall man. She looked at the word above them, in Lily's careful letters, "Our family." She thought about October, about a parking lot and formats and a blue dress she almost didn't wear, about a woman who had spent years becoming an expert at disappearing, who had built walls with such precision that nothing got through, who had whispered across a restaurant table that no man would choose her and had heard, in return, a certainty so simple it had cracked something open. She thought about every door she had walked through since then, every moment she had chosen to stay when the old habit said, "Go," every conversation that had cost her something and returned something larger. Every morning she had opened the locked room door a little further and let in a little more light. She thought about her mother across a kitchen table, saying, "You always were braver than you believed." She thought about a man who had promised her honesty and kept the promise every single day. She looked at this drawing. She understood something that she would spend the rest of her life discovering new dimensions of, something that could not have been explained to her from the outside, something that could only be arrived at by walking the full distance of the road that brought her here. Love was not the absence of fear. It was not the resolution of every wound or the quieting of every old voice or the perfect dismantling of every wall. It was not the ending of difficulty or the guarantee of easy. Love was this specific, ordinary, extraordinary thing. A drawing on a bakery counter. A man who remembered what flour you preferred. A child who tracked her father's smiles and asked about cartwheels and decided, with the efficient authority of someone who had thought it through, that you belonged. Love was showing up, again and again, even when it was terrifying. Especially then. Emma Carter, who had spent years practicing the art of disappearing, who had built walls with the precision of someone who understood exactly how much the alternatives could cost, who had stood in a restaurant bathroom and seriously considered a window, who had whispered across a table the most defeated thing she'd ever said out loud. Emma Carter had stopped disappearing. She was here, fully, finally, without apology or minimization, or the performance of a smaller version of herself, constructed for the comfort of people who couldn't hold the real one. She was here, and she was seen, and she was loved, and she knew it. And she had always been enough.